contact, and he called me up and he told me about this program that he started, that he just described to you, and I said, I just wrote the book on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wrote is kind of a joke, since it took, 10 to 15 years, really. It was 15 years of research and 10 years of writing it. But it pulled together all the science that had been emerging, brand new science, that when we discovered that there's such a thing as a social brain, we all have them, we're social mammals, and the social brain allows us to connect in all kinds of social ways and reproductive ways. It's essential to the survival of the social mammals, and it runs on a brain chemistry that nobody had realized before. So when I looked at it, these early reports coming out, what I saw was, wait a minute, those are the same effects that we're seeing in these early days of animal-assisted therapy. Now, this is in 1993, and so those were early days. And people were saying, that animals were making them less aggressive and feeling calmer and bringing down heart rate and blood pressure. And I said, why? And for the children here tonight, I would say, well, everybody has to remain a student their whole life or it's very boring. But always ask why. And you'd be surprised. When I interviewed a scientist who told me that he had one of the very early animal-assisted therapy programs, and the kids in the program who had severe behavior disorders and attention disorders, when they were involved with the animals, their heart rate came down and their blood pressure came down, and they had no behavior problems, and their learning skills increased dramatically. But what caught my ear was the heart rate and the blood pressure story. So I said, well, what is the biological mechanism that's causing that? Seems like a very logical question to, I'm sure, almost everybody in this room. It had never been asked before. I was actually told by this scientist that it was, well, unconditional love. Animals give unconditional love, and that calms people down. And I said, well, yeah, but you're talking about a physiological effect, so there has to be a physiological cause of it. And because I asked that question and nobody had an answer, that's what started me on a 15-year hunt, Nancy Drew, to find the answer. And I was very lucky because it was the best story that you could ever find. And I'm going to start you on that journey. Fasten your seatbelts. It's 1 million years ago in this picture. I'm taking you back to the Ice Age because it's all about evolution and how we got to this moment with what's going on right here. This is what our ancestors looked at every day, all day, their whole lives. We were this big over here, just watching the most amazing, and this doesn't want to work, amazing landscape, moving, living landscape of things that were bigger, faster, stronger, and we were wildly outnumbered by them. And they were very dangerous. And all we could do was stare at them for dear life and figure out what their strengths were, what their weaknesses were, and how we could get some of that food. And in staring at them, what we didn't realize was there's no such thing as just watching. There is a chemical action that happens in your brain when you stare at something long enough. The way you feel is you start to develop a sense of intimacy towards it. You get to know it pretty well. Before you know it, you start to feel kind of attached. You relate to it. It becomes very known to you and subtly works its way into your emotional life. And so there we were, just watching for dear life and sparking these changes in our prehistoric brains, our silent prehistoric brains, no language yet. And we were animal behavior experts like you'll never be again because our life depended on it. And so we watched these social carnivores who ruled the Ice Age. We were mere prey. We were not the predators we are now. Now I say that it's particularly relevant to PTSD because prey animals have a different central nervous system. It's the same central nervous system we have, but the triggers are different. It's hair trigger. And than a predator has. We were just prey animals. And These were the guys who ruled the show. We stared at them so long and so hard that we went into caves, black caves with torches, and could draw them. Now, I just want to show you, this is what we were drawing. And wildlife biologists today who study in Africa will point out to you, A, the behavior is spot on. The whisker dots are what modern day wildlife biologists use to identify individuals in a lion pack. And except that they do it with telephoto lenses and binoculars. So this tells us a whole bunch. What this tells us was, A, we were able to get very close to these animals. We were not deadly afraid of them. We had some level of detente. There's no doubt in my mind that just like wildlife biologists today know individuals in a pride because of their whisker dots, our ancestors knew individual animals because you knew the ones to avoid. And so these were close neighbors of our ancestors. And we were utterly fascinated. We had burned them into our retinas, into our visual memories, and again, remember, we stared at them and there was no language in the way, there was no white noise. Our sense of visual acuity and memory must have been phenomenal. And what were we staring at all that time? Animals. That's how animals just wove their way into our consciousness, our primitive consciousness, the emerging consciousness, our language, and remain deeply embedded in our DNA and our non-conscious brains as well as our conscious brains today. And this was our fascination. We painted them 45 million times for 20,000 years. That's an obsession. This is the first virtual reality ever. This is where humans, for the first time, recreated animals and said, you go here, you go there, you do this, you do that. What a power trip this had to have been. Because otherwise, we were just, hanging in the margins, not really running any show at all, except in our caves. And these we know now with three-dimensionality, they're incredible graphic detail, and they've shown that with light flickering, you'd use like a rock like this to make a haunch three-dimensional, that they had movement, they were movies, they were TV, they were church, they were everything to us. And that's how important animals were in the primitive prey Ice Age psyche of humans. And this is how we thought humans were. We didn't waste a lot of charcoal on it. It is very, very rare to find, to find a depiction of a human in any of these drawings. And you see, what can you say? I can't tell you what Ice Age people were thinking. I can just show you what they did. Doesn't look like a big ego to me, yet. And this is just as old as those paintings. Those paintings are 30,000 years old.